All right, Pamela, start us off with your favorite human interest story for 2021. What captured your attention the most?
I think that the biggest human interest story for Canada this year has been the Indigenous children found, and the remains of the Indigenous children found, and how it's taken something that everybody's known on the periphery for decades and really touched our hearts, so that people who in the past were able to ignore it are no longer able to ignore it. And so we've had a number of stories, even in Muskoka, of things that are happening. I think about Nico Makwa and Niso Makwa in Gravenhurst and his Orange Ribbon campaign. I think about Joyce Jonathan Crone and the columns that she's been writing for us and her endeavors in Huntsville, the shoes on Town Hall. There's an awareness. There's an opportunity right now for Canada to do better. And I think people are seizing on it.
It's interesting that that's the story that you chose, and I like how you framed it about a national story. Often in Muskoka and Parry Sound, we can be insulated from a lot of things that are national stories. And even when we think about COVID, it was very quiet here, right? We didn't have that same experience, but with our Indigenous partners and the stories that we were hearing, it really did bring home a national story to almost every single community in this riding. So great choice. Matt, what about you? What's your favorite human interest story that you got to cover this year?
It was a story that I wrote. I can't remember the month, but it was towards the beginning of the year. I actually went back and reread it because it was about a 27-year-old girl named Caitlin Sari who was diagnosed with pancreatitis, which unfortunately many people do deal with. But her condition was so severe that her parents and they decided she was going to undergo become only the second person in the province to get what's called a quote unquote super liver. I'm going to look at my notes because there's a whole lot that went into what was done. And it was first diagnosed at the Bracebridge Hospital, and then they transferred her to Toronto for that operation. So what they did was they removed the pancreas, they removed her spleen, half of her stomach, part of her intestines, and essentially they rerouted her entire digestive tract to try to combat the pancreatitis, and she was able to recover. She's now, I reach out to her every so often just to see how she's doing, and she thankfully is doing just fine now. She recovered great. And I just thought it was such an incredible story because so often you hear about these procedures that happen somewhere in Europe. It's an experimental procedure, but not often do you hear about it happening in your own backyard, and not often do you hear about it going so well that the person now is able to live a normal life without the pain that they were dealing with before. So I think that for me was a story that I loved covering because it just showed the fortitude, the ability for someone to fight back and have the will to continue on. And it inspired me writing about her.
And an interesting story that hopefully we'll be able to follow again next year just to see how that is going for her. James, your best human interest story.
So I'm going on a more national scale as well, like Pam did, but in order to do that, I'm going on a local scale to start out with to explain my story. And I want to talk about a man who was very close to me that passed away this year. Very familiar on the show. Tom Mangos, who was the news director of Radio Works Parry Sound, passed away at the end of the summer, and unfortunately that happened. I found out about it. It was a massive loss to the community of Parry Sound and to Muskoka as well. Tom's news coverage was quite good, and he had many close connections in that community. And I won't go into detail of his death. It was natural causes, but one thing that does come from it is the need, and has come from this pandemic, is the need to have discussions around mental health and the lack of services that are provided right now, not only in this province, but in this country. And that is top tier of my human interest because it affects everyone. I think we've realized through this pandemic that that more and more people are suffering from mental health disorders, myself included, with anxiety and depression that I was diagnosed with in 2020. And it has become such a massive issue that I think we are now overwhelmed by the amount of need for service in Ontario and Canada. And every day I can at least find somebody that has a story to tell that has been dealing with this issue. So moving forward, I think we need to take a huge look at the stigma that's attached to mental health, and realize that everyone is in some way touched or affected by mental health, even more so than cancer, even more so than any other disease that you could come up with. And it is a massive issue that we need to be dealing with moving forward. And again, I just want to pay respects to Tom Mangos. He was a massive part of this community. He was a good friend of mine, and he will forever be missed. And hopefully his memory can help move this discussion forward. So.
And I, along with you, he's been on the Muskoka Matters quite a bit, and we'll miss him, and always enjoyed having him on and his perspective from Parry Sound as well. So thank you. Hopefully this year you're going to be able to push more of those stories and bring more of that to light to take that stigma off. So.